Hello again, North Haven. My name is Stephanie Javarakis, and I'm excited to be here again with the Democratic candidate for state representative for North Haven, Steve Gifford. Steve, thank you again for taking time away from your campaign to talk with me today. Today I would like to focus on two specific items within the North Haven community, which are seniors and veterans. Obviously, seniors are a major part of this North Haven community. What do you see as the problems that face seniors in North Haven today?
So, Stephanie, thank you for having me again. I know you have important Pokemons to be catching, so we'll get you back to that. This is a really important issue, especially because within Connecticut, we have seniors make up a larger portion of our population than many other states. And then within North Haven, we are actually above average for Connecticut as a whole. So this is obviously a very important issue to a lot of North Haven voters. I think the biggest issues, and I hate to be the business guy who comes in and says, well, everything's related to economics and economic development, but everything's related to economics and economic development. The biggest issues that end up impacting seniors disproportionately can really be traced back to the state's economy and things dealing with that. So you've saved for retirement, you've planned what your expenses are going to be after you stop working. That gets thrown for a loop when you now have your kids and your grandkids living with you. You didn't budget for them. We fix that if they have jobs, but that's only going to, and can move out and into their own place and stop, only come to visit with the grandchildren. But that only happens if they have jobs, companies coming into the state, companies growing and hiring, and the education and training that they need for that. So that's one area where you have senior issues directly impacted by the economy. Another is just housing prices. So for most seniors, for most everyone, your house is your largest asset. That's what you're relying on for retirement. The only way that house has value, though, is if you can sell it. If you can't find a buyer for it or can't find a buyer at the price you need for it, then it's not valuable. And the things that go into and I've written about this for economic development and in letters to the editor. The things that go into making your house valuable if you're a senior looking to sell and downsize are the schools, the community, and is that a desirable place for the people your age who are looking to find their first house and move into it. So everything becomes interrelated, and for seniors, the quality of living is directly related to the quality of the economy in the town and in the state, which is something we talked about in the last the last one of these as well.
All right. There's a lot of problems facing seniors in North Haven, it seems. If you're elected state representative, what would you do to help these seniors that are being affected in North Haven?
So I think the biggest single issue, and the one that affects everybody, is property taxes. I know as a business owner, property tax is the largest single check I write in a year. To just 5 digits to the town right there. And that's true for most seniors living on a fixed income. You've paid off your mortgage, you don't have some of the other expenses, but that is a huge check that you're writing every year to the town. Most of the town's budget comes from property taxes. Most of every town's budget comes from property taxes. And it's a weird skew that probably shouldn't exist. If we were planning it from the ground up, probably shouldn't exist. I would like to see an adjustment in all of the state and the town's tax collection. And I don't know what this looks like. I can't put numbers to it because someone studied this, but it hasn't been me. Where the town is supported in part by property tax, but in part by an income tax based on the people who are working in the town, and in part by income tax based on the people who are living in the town. All that data exists when the Department of Revenue Service collects it. It's just a question of revenue sharing. I think some sort of mix would be better for both the town and the state, and have less of a huge impact on seniors on fixed incomes, because it's a very strange system where you have people who have lived in town all their lives, who have contributed to the community for 40 years. My neighbors who haven't been working in 20 years are paying the exact same amount in property taxes as me, who's actually working right now. It doesn't, you would never design it that way from the ground up. We've just sort of fallen into the system. We need to move away from it, and it's one of the things that make our state's reliance as a whole on property taxes is one of the things that makes it very expensive to live here. The other thing that happens is as your house goes up in value, the amount you're paying goes up in value. But your income coming in hasn't changed. It's one of the things we've addressed in small pieces. I was on the town's Senior Property Tax Stabilization Committee, I guess this past winter, and we were looking at it for seniors who are on low income to freeze it so that it wouldn't keep increasing. But that's sort of a stopgap. On a holistic way for the entire state, we need to shift things so that there's a mix of revenue sources and it's not just relying on one thing that disproportionately impacts seniors on a fixed income.
We've been talking a lot about the problems that seniors face, so let's kind of switch it up a bit, and I'm going to ask you if you believe that there are any positives for seniors within North Haven.
Steph, that's a really good point, and I think it's very important that we don't get bogged down in saying everything is terrible. The biggest reason people stay in North Haven after they've retired is just, they grew up here, they raised their families here, this is where they want to be, and that makes perfect sense to me. It's why my wife and I and my family chose to move to North Haven in the first place. But if you look at the greater New Haven area, if you look at Connecticut as a whole, we have, I've lived in the South and Southeast, we have much more to do. We have a lot more cultural institutions, activities, things to do than you're going to get in Central Florida. And statistically, we live longer. If you live in Connecticut, you're putting years on your life that you're not in Florida or in Arizona. The reason for that is very simply Yale New Haven isn't in Central Florida. And you've got better access to better medical care. As much as we complain about it, nobody likes going to the hospital, but we have better access to those systems than we do almost anywhere else in the country. We have better access to more people, more things to do. I think it is a great community for it. I think there's more we as a town and state can do to adjust what we're paying for it, adjust some of the systems to make it easier to get around without a car. That becomes a big issue, and make sure that there are enough 55 and over communities to support, because as the baby boom is cresting, we're seeing more and more people who need that kind of housing, and we need to make sure that our zoning rules and our planning is keeping up with that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do agree with that point. We're going to shift to an area that does overlap with seniors. I think it's important that we talk about veterans. Now, Steve, you are a veteran yourself, correct?
That's right. So I served 2 tours in Iraq as an Army officer. I think I'm still the youngest person in the American Legion in North Haven, but there's a huge overlap between, obviously, veterans and seniors.
What issues are facing North Haven veterans today?
So a lot of the things you see are the same for any older population, but there are some unique pieces to it as well. Returning veterans from my generation are dealing with PTSD issues, dealing with specific medical challenges that are unique to veterans and that most doctors haven't dealt with before, and so access to that treatment is always a difficulty. We've been somewhat fortunate in Connecticut that the issues we've seen at the West Haven, the issues we've seen in the VA as a whole, we haven't seen as much in West Haven and Newington VAs. It's still not great. It still could be a lot better, but for better or worse, we're on the better side nationally. The issues that face now, let me go back a little bit on PTSD because it's an important point. In a way, veterans of my generation are fortunate because we're more aware of PTSD issues, and they're diagnosed earlier and treated earlier. Vietnam era, Korean War era veterans, there was no name for it, there was no treatment for it, and it was just sort of a, suck it up and move on kind of thing. And so now that we're aware of it, some of them are able to get treatment, but this has been going on for 30, 40 years before they can really get the help that they need for it. And unfortunately, in the meantime, the symptoms of it, of having trouble holding down a job, family problems, homelessness, things like that, have only gotten worse without any kind of treatment or being addressed. Specifically, more for my generation, you have other issues around employment. It's a constant struggle of explaining, I did this, this, and this in the military, and then that can translate to a civilian position. It's something that in recent years, a lot of states, Connecticut included, have done a good job of saying, okay, if you were a military medic, and you were qualified in these things, it should be very easy for you to become an EMT. That's something that translates well, where before it was just, okay, well, you need to take the test anyway, you need to take all the courses anyway. Military truck drivers, very similar thing, it makes it easier to get CDL. These are all state-regulated programs, and we as a state have opened those up over time. But employment is really still a sticking point. The unemployment rate for veterans, for post-9/11 veterans, it's gotten better. It was running double the unemployment rate for just that cohort, that age group as a whole, and that's something that you can address on a larger state level, but it's almost an employer by employer education issue where you really need to just let employers understand that, okay, by hiring a combat veteran, you're hiring somebody who is extremely flexible, is extremely adaptable, has definitely done harder things than anything they're going to be asked of to do in your workplace. That's something I've practiced as well in my workplace. I've had a couple of veterans. I think I've 3 working for me right now, and it's not out of charity. It's really just, I know that if I hire them, I can give them pretty much any job, and they're going to figure out how to do it, and that's something I understand.
I think it's a very important point that the elder veteran population of North Haven mixed with the younger population of the veterans in North Haven, it differs substantially in the issues that they face, and I do think that's very important. What can the state do to help both these sectors of people? There
are a number of things. There are things the state has been doing and that the state can do as well. The biggest thing is honestly recognition, and this is something that especially the Vietnam era was lacking. The thing that I think it's very important that as the government officials understand and recognize generally is that veterans are people who went well above and beyond anything that's normally expected of you as a citizen. And so the thing, if you are damaged or if you are hurt from that in some way, it's the government's responsibility to kind of make you whole on that. And that applies across the spectrum there. There are other programs that I testified this spring on one program for helping veteran-owned businesses. It's something that I believe was actually proposed by a North Haven resident initially. It's been in the works for many years, and then this year we were finally able to push it through and make it law. But to specifically help in the realm of state contracting. There are a number of other programs that need some work. There are some issues with better funding for veteran cemeteries and the Veterans Home in Rocky Hill. But I think really recognizing and understanding that these are citizens who really went above and beyond is the starting point you need for any kind of veterans legislation.
That's a very amazing thing to say. You seem to have a lot of compassion for both veterans and elders within the North Haven and the state community itself. So, Steve, thank you for answering my questions again. I really appreciate you taking time out of your campaign and sitting with me here. Stay tuned with us on North Haven Television for further interviews we will be having with Democratic candidate Stephen Gifford. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steph.